Okay, so thanks to those schools in CAM for facilitating that session there. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in applying evidence-informed practices in schools, but in any context actually, is how to scale and sustain practice. Schools, like other organisations, are large organisations with a diverse workforce and staff, and they have different knowledge, beliefs, skills, and experiences that inform their practice. So achieving some level of consistency across schools in terms of evidence-based practices is complex. It's probably the most difficult dimension of the knowledge mobilisation process that the model that we follow, communicating and mediating the knowledge into practice in ways that are actionable and sustainable. So how can this be done? Our final session this morning before lunch, we're approaching lunch with rapidity, so our final is to look at a panel discussion. And an element of what we've been doing has been a panel discussion anyway, hasn't it? We've had lots of that. So if we have to just shift the time up a little bit, I don't think we've lost anything because we've had some really good conversation already, but we'll squeeze things in to make sure we get to lunch on time. But before we invite that panel up, we're going to hear from St Joseph's College, Gregory Terrace, and Goulburn Valley Grammar School. They're going to discuss their insights into the mediation process and what works and what doesn't work, and when we're trying to sustain evidence-informed practices. So, first of all, can I invite, which way around? Terrace, Gregory Terrace, first of all, please. Thanks. Thank you. I think maybe a quick idea. There you go. Thank you.
First, I'd like to say thanks to Steph and her team. We've really appreciated being part of this project and having the opportunity to listen to the variety of ways that schools, you have endeavoured to improve the lives of the students at your school. And also too, found it somewhat comforting that there's been some common outcomes, common learnings as well as a result of that. I don't think my son knows how to study. It's a common statement that we seem to have heard across the years. I'm sure it's a statement that you've heard too. It's a statement from parents where their son's performance is not meeting expectations. But when asked, students could then provide reasonable responses to how to study and their understanding and demonstrate an understanding of how to study. So they've shown that understanding of study strategies and seem to, in some ways, one, surprise their parents, but also two, at the same time, contradict what they're saying. So why wouldn't a student be using these, especially when in the current system there's external exams and they're heavily weighted? As a large school, boys' school with a strong academic tradition, we have in the past advocated a range of study techniques, and we've taught these across our curriculum. These techniques have been badged, or we've used terminology to label these techniques in a manner that's somewhat unique to Terrace. So students don't hear the language outside of school with their friends, or when they go and they endeavour to research some of these techniques themselves. Or even if they come onto university, the language we've used is somewhat different to what the universities have used. So students have known a range of strategies, but have not necessarily applied them. For us, this led to the question about what could be the gap, what's the gap between the understanding and the application. So we were somewhat determined to find out what the latest research suggested were the most effective principles or methods to studying for exams and for learning. It became very clear to us that active revision was far more effective than passive review. Students who were not performing were overwhelmingly using passive methods. When asked why they would, they answered very honestly, because it was easier. The question was then whether or not students actually believed that the effort involved in applying the strategies was worthwhile. Am I wasting my time, or is it worth the hard work? This was the point where we contacted Steph and the University of Queensland, the Learning Research Centre at UQ, to compare what we were espousing with what research had revealed. Whilst it was indeed very similar, we decided to use common language, which was most likely used at universities that they'll attend. Whilst there had been incredible work from staff inside the Terrace gates, going outside the gates to an establishment such as UQ also brings a level of confidence to students and parents alike that these techniques are worthwhile. So in our approach, we conducted a full school survey, which was completed by almost, 1,700 students. I think we had about 1,500 students, which was quite a good research base. We thought we knew what the students would say. We had a hunch, but like some of you, we were inaccurate with our assumptions. Just because the students were familiar with study methods did not mean they used them, nor did they often have a range of methods, but rather just used one or two. Pleasingly, there seemed to be more active work, such as answering questions and writing their own bullet point notes, but still the application was the gap between knowledge and application.
I'm going to stand behind the desk, feel much safer back here. Okay, that was the findings of the research we did within the school for looking at different elements. That Anthony talked there about some of the language we had in the past, like walk the corridors, Friday roll call. They were kind of Terrifies terminology for the research that's been discussed on, several times today. We're very lucky at Terrace in that we have a subject once a week, which we call the formation program. This allows us to use that lesson to bring in relevant pastoral topics as well as study skills. And we use those formation teachers to set off our initial survey to see what knowledge there was around these studied principles before we embedded them into our program. We did it at the start of the term to get that base, and surely we thought they're not going to have a deep grasp of these, and we were wrong. Okay, the staff, in fact, had quite a good understanding of these 5 principles, either from their own experiences or hearing about them from the assemblies where the initial messages were coming down for us, or what they'd met from school's textbook, from the students' textbooks, etc. The plan was in January to hold a full staff session to present what we're discussing today, but like it's come up on a couple of occasions, COVID hit us, and it's fair to say that our greatest challenge has been the delay because of that. So implications in terms of teaching and learning. I'm going a bit quicker because I just saw the minute sign. The turning point arrived after the project had commenced. There was a new position created within the school where the Dean of Pedagogy and Innovation was introduced. The timing could not have been better for us. One of the many large shifts was the creation of a new teaching and learning framework. We could not have had a better opportunity to find our findings with effective study methods with the new framework that now underpins academia at our school. So transformation of applying research-based techniques independently is a goal for our students to achieve. So finally, the challenge remains for the whole staff to gain both an understanding and confidence in advocating as well as common language around these techniques. It is only through a culture at the school that we feel the real change will happen with our students. But this is the challenge. How do we go about scaling and sustaining this work across the whole school with all staff? How do we ensure our students are getting consistent messaging about effective learning strategies, as well as diverse opportunities to practice and build their own knowledge and skills? And what is the role of our team in mediating the process for the college?
These guys are going to stick around for the panel discussion in a second, but we're going to move straight to Goulburn Valley to present their project. Thanks. There'll be an opportunity to chat to these guys in a sec.
And the pocket. Yeah. Hello. That's cool. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Now I'm going to go a bit old school today. I don't have a full set of slides. There's just going to be 2 images. And the other good thing about that is what I probably would have said if I planned out fully is a lot of what's already been said. So I can just take all the best bits of all those other schools, and because it all totally applies for us. So I'm from Goulburn Valley Grammar School in Shepparton, down in Victoria. We were the first Victorian school to join Steph's partnership. Our first flirtations with educational research actually predated UQ. We were playing around with the learning scientists who have come up a lot today, playing around with their work and looking at a program at Year 7 to try to teach our students how to prepare properly for revision tasks, for assessment tasks, things like that. We happened to be the Uni Melb thing down in Melbourne. Steph was speaking with Jack, who used to be part of the program, and we heard them speak and went, we need to be part of that because that's going to accelerate our progress in this area. So we joined. The first year, we wanted to take a look at that Year 7 Learning to Learn program and work out, was it actually doing anything or was it a total waste of time? We also wanted to build our, essentially a learner's toolkit. And luckily we'd seen a bit of what Churchy had done, so we were able to build on their fantastic work. We followed a similar timeframe to Canterbury and I think Terrace as well. So in that first year, the Learning to Learn program, to evaluate that, we took a similar approach to Melbourne Girls with that open kind of survey, free recall to see what they did to revise for assessment tasks. And the data was positive, but then again, knowledge of strategies doesn't necessarily equal use of strategies. The main thing I want to focus on today is our learners toolkit though. So the second part of our UQ project. We, as well as doing our Year 7 surveys, we also surveyed our staff. How do you help kids revise? If a student comes to ask you about revision, what do you tell them? And there was lots of really good stuff, but everyone was speaking a different language. And it was really nicely typified by one teacher who said, they're a psychology teacher. They noticed the student doing health revision. And this excellent activity was based on retrieval and all these other things. And the teacher said, oh, you could do that in psychology as well, that kind of activity. And the kid said, nah, it's a health activity. And so we knew we had this issue with speaking a different language. So we began to build our toolkit and we drew on the learning scientists, we drew on the page, all the readings that Canterbury had up as well. We used them. And we came up with this. Now it's not built for a screen, so it's a bit blurry. This is part of a whole suite of products. We know that one poster on a wall doesn't make a difference, as you all know. And today I can't possibly talk about everything. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of the things that we did. So we built this, and it's got all those same principles that you've seen throughout. We chucked in a little bit of that organizational aspect of study that we focus on in our tutorial program. And we also put down the bottom a feedback and act. And I was reminded about the importance of this. One of my Unit 3-4, that's Year 12 geography students who are finishing their exam in 21 minutes down in Shepparton at the moment, did a practice exam and I said, oh, great, okay. Did you self-correct it? Do you want me to look at it? And she went, nah, I didn't, chucked it in the bin. And I just went, oh, Amelia, what are you doing? This feedback act wasn't there. So that's why we put that in as well. Now, when we built this, the next few years, we took a 3-pronged approach to make sure this stuck. Now, Victoria was hammered by COVID. We weren't quite as bad as Melbourne, but we were one of the worst hit rural areas. We wanted to make sure parents, teachers, and students knew what we were doing. So our teacher professional learning was very much focused about this. Again, like Canterbury, we've just redesigned our teaching and learning model to make it really, really simple. It was ridiculous. Now it's simple. And this fit in. And when we were communicating with staff, we said, this links into this part of our model. With parents, we did run an info session. There was 100 to 150 people came to that. But we also built a page on our learning management system. So parents can access this, the language, resources. We built this for parents as well. Again, not designed for a screen, so you won't be able to read it. Parent tips. Same language, same branding. So they know when we're talking about retrieving, if they're interested enough to log on to our LMS, they can go and find out about it as well. With the students, Year 7 Learning to Learn program, what we were doing originally was okay. Now I look back and go, oh, it wasn't great. It's been fully realigned to this model. Year 8, Year 9, we build within our pastoral programs on this and the teachers based on their professional learning. Year 9's also worked with Jared Cooney Horvath, who some of you may have heard of or know of, and they do a unit in science specifically based on the learning scientists as part of their, I don't know what they do in Year 9 science, the brain or something. So they do that and they look at the learning scientists. Year 10 pastoral program, preparing for exams. Toolkit comes through, teachers use this to structure their revision. We also do activities where we look at scenarios. How could this person improve their revision? What are they doing that's good? What are they doing that's not good? So it's a work in progress that's been hammered by COVID, but we're gradually making this become common practice. Very quickly, just to finish, we do these things, we have common lessons. So Year 8 English all do the same lesson. The Year 8 English team builds those lessons together. That's fast-tracked the application of these principles because everyone does the same thing and everyone builds it according to our teaching and learning model, which our toolkit's part of. So they're there. Even if the students don't know they're doing it, they're doing these activities by stealth because every lesson starts with some kind of retrieval. Our staff professional learning starts with a retrieval task. And sometimes I feel embarrassed that I've totally forgotten what we did in the last one. So yeah, we'll keep going forward. We'll keep trying to get more and more buy-in as we go, but there's positive steps and we're looking forward to a COVID and flood-free 2023.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll have a panel discussion just now and we'd like to invite Canterbury down as well, please. A representative. And I suppose the presentations so far this morning have represented schools at different parts of the knowledge mobilisation journey. And I think what we have is the opportunity now to see, talk to some of the schools that have, oh, here we go. Yeah. Oh, carry on.
Just while they're setting up, the reason that these 3 schools are participating in the panel is they've been with us for the longest time. And I think they've got really good insights for our newer schools and for other schools coming on board to share in this process of mediation. So that's why they're here. It's not because they've all done learning strategies, it's because they've been here for a couple of years.
So you should join the panel too, Steph, really. You know, taking it through from beginning to end. That's Steph's. Okay, anyway, so I'll kick off with an initial question if I can, and then Cam and I will share the questions and then we'll open up to the floor as well, to the room as well. So your teams, your projects have seen some positive impacts on the student learning in relation to the interventions that you've put into place. And you're now in the process of scaling that up across the school to more teachers and making it more widespread. Essentially now you've become the knowledge brokers or mediators of this work in your school. So would you be able to tell us a little bit about what you've done to facilitate that mobilisation process? I know we've touched on it briefly in your presentations, but how have you moved from the initial phases to bring it as a whole school initiative now? Who'd like to jump in?
It is on. That's great. Well, firstly, we're probably another year or so behind some of these schools, so we're still in the process of completing the study. But I suppose an important point was right at the start. It was fairly superficial for me. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted out of the project. I wanted to find out what were the main effective study strategies for boys. We'd put that into the program, they'd use them, and that would sort of be the end of it. And I listened to Canterbury and Goulburn and Churchill in particular when we first came on board. And more of what they said certainly sank in as we went down the path. So it's got to be a lot deeper than what we thought at the start. So I suppose whilst putting it into students, we've had to embed it in assemblies, in year level assemblies, parent information evenings. Working with staff, heads of faculty was one of the first things we did. The actual teachers with those study skill formation lessons that we have once a week, we had to hold PD for them, do a pre-survey of what their understandings were of the topics, etc., to gain a deeper understanding. And then we certainly didn't get COVID the way some other people have had it in the room, which was mentioned before. We only had a couple of weeks, but it was enough to knock out the presentation that we were going to do with whole staff, and that just seems to get postponed and postponed. So we're still on that journey, I suppose. But there is that common language in the school. You know, we had to shift from some of these taglines that needed a fair bit of defining before you even got to what do they mean.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, is my thing working since I knocked it off? Cool. Yeah, I think the kind of all-in approach worked. We knew this was something we needed to do, and we fully committed. In previous years, Pia was kind of, oh, let's just do a little bit of this, a little bit of this. But we went, no, simplified. Let's get really, really good at what we want to be good at and hammer that. And when last year we were looking at a timetable change, and when teachers started using the language of our toolkit against us to try and stop the timetable change, on one hand, we're like, that's annoying. On the other hand, we're like, there's a clear understanding there. But going all in and fully committing, I think, is vital, because if you just do little bits, it's not great. And we're lucky we have a lot of really interested staff, and our common lessons help to really accelerate with the non-believers. Is that a good word? Mm-hmm. Skeptics.
Yeah, like we said in our presentation, where we got to the point where we've been working on it for 3 years. We've rolled out our teaching and learning program, our planning documents, and it's in there. So we're at the point where we actually need to just live it next year as a college and as a community, that our professional learning and professional growth for staff incorporates everything that we promoted as effective for the students, and that we continue to push it as effective for the classroom and for study habits. So that's it from a sort of infrastructure perspective, but I might get James to talk about it from a digital perspective as well, because he's been the driving force behind that.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Maybe before the digital, because I wasn't actually thinking that, but it's funny, like when you start out, you're not thinking about what's going to happen in year 3. You think, okay, we've got a project this year that we're starting on. What's sort of the first thing we're looking at? And our sort of evolution over those 3 years, I think, was almost sort of based on, okay, so we've done this, what's missing? And then we sort of looked for the next thing. And I guess we've sort of come to that realization. We've got multiple stakeholders involved here. Like the students are sort of the major stakeholder, but we've also got teachers in a variety of contexts. I mean, we've involved our form teachers, as some of the other schools have, sort of around that, you know, what can we do in our pastoral system around some of the things, but also in the context of subjects and how we use things. Parents are also a massive stakeholder as well. So, you know, we ran a parent night at one point where, you know, anybody could come in, and any of the parents could come in and just have a look at the strategies, and we sort of took them through some activities, and that sort of thing was valuable as well. So I think one of our learnings has been that those multiple stakeholders sort of need to be, one, maybe addressed at different points in the project, but only then it can sort of go forward. From a digital point of view, Jake just mentions that. I think, yeah, having digital systems that can back these things up are good. I was impressed with the Goulburn Valley when they were talking about how they've got their framework up for anybody to see, which I think is really useful. I mean, we've used Teams a fair bit, so we've got like an all-staff team that teachers can sort of post different things up in terms of what they're doing, which has been really good. But we've also got a learning management system, and we use OneNote with our students, and embedding those strategies into the OneNotes. We mentioned about having a common template from next year as part of our framework, which sort of really going to, I guess, just ensure some of that consistency around using the strategies as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Oh, Ryan, yeah, please. Have a question. Mari's having a workout today.
Awesome. So on that point about skeptics and non-believers, my question to everyone is, what have been the biggest challenges you've had in trying to implement these strategies in terms of your staff's receptiveness? What have been the kind of primary rationales behind the pushback, or if you have experienced much of that? I work with Steph, so I'm on kind of this side of the metaphorical fence, and I would love to know ahead of time, before I kind of step into this world potentially myself, yeah, what are the primary challenges, so I can kind of anticipate that, I suppose.
I was gonna say, I just crossed that out.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Look, I think it's a really interesting question, because when you're trying to implement research in a school, the biggest challenge is I don't have time for that, because I've got to teach my kids, and it's about the teaching and learning, and I don't really want to read anything, and I really don't have time to absorb that, because I've got content to get through for an external exam. And so particularly in our context, that was our biggest challenge. Because our project started with a very small niche question, in that we were targeting what students were doing at home. And then the way it unfolded was we then took the opportunity to embed that in a pedagogical framework that we were in the process of developing. Staff came last for us. And so the challenge has been, particularly at our school, well, it's for the kids, you know, how do we get buy-in? The challenge is, I guess, how do you convince them that the research is actually applicable? And I think State High said it really well when they said, you know, their staff was really receptive to research. Jake said something similar at Canterbury. If research knocked on the door at Terrace, our staff would shut it in their face. And that's just the reality of your context. And I think part of the challenge with research is understanding the context in which you're trying to have it infiltrate. And so Damien and I've talked about this a lot, that we at Terrace are going for a slow burn. So our research is coming in under the door jamb, and it's that little gas that's going to permeate through. And that's how we're going to get buy-in with our staff. Sneak it in, yeah.
No, ours is exactly the same. It's just time as well. We've got a really, really supportive executive and head of school as well. So next year, every 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to be working on things around the science of learning, around effective teaching, and around our teaching and learning framework. And I think it's a lot of the detractors sometimes, it's not that staff don't want to or aren't willing, but they're just coming up against curriculum, assessments, COVID, floods, sport, family life. It's just, if you can get the school or the institution to commit the time to support them, and you give them the infrastructure to do that, staff, we found are really willing and able.
And it's going to the project, it's important to be super clear on the why. I mean, you don't just join Steph's team project for fun. It's got to be an outcome. It's great fun, but that's not the sole reason. And being clear with the staff about that, and making sure that any change is something we're really trying to do. It's got to improve student outcomes in some capacity, and improve, I don't want to say teacher efficiency, I mean, make life easier for staff. So adding something extra, if something comes in, something goes. That helped us. But yeah, one of our big practical issues is what I call legacy resources. So a resource someone's used for exam revision for 15 years that's still littered with the old wrong language. And when they get around to it, they just print it off as is. And so to partly fix that, it didn't work this year. We do, before the exam periods, dedicated professional learning session. Go work on your resources. Here are some templates you might want to include. But that's a frustration. It's just old language hovering around. And it's more of a practical than a philosophical issue.
We might just go to the final question, I think, for the panel. If there are other schools out there, whether they be here or online, that are looking at embarking on a journey similar to yours, as in implementing evidence-informed practice. What advice would you share, Nav, looking from your perspective now?
I think for us, it was being open to opportunities that present along the way. Like we never dreamt of being at something like this, and we never dreamt that it would lead to a whole school learning framework and different positions being used. The other thing I'd probably say is just keeping it in context, and the fact that these things make sense is what I always keep coming back to with people. I meet with a lot of boys that are meeting with me for a reason. They're usually pretty passive and aren't using these strategies effectively, particularly in years 7, 8 and 9. And one boy, I started the other day and said, okay, year 7 science. So how would you usually prepare for an exam? Show us what you've got. And he had a list of definitions, and the state high science teachers would certainly relate to this. But I said, okay, when you sit those exams, are the questions, here's 20 words, define them? And he said, no. I said, okay, well, your preparation has to match what you're doing for the exam. And I had another boy walk in. I usually just ask, as they're walking in with parents, do you play an instrument or do you play sport? And that's often an in for me. So there was a boy in year 8 that said, yeah, I'm rowing at the moment. And we sat down and I said, why would you be rowing at the moment? That's not till March next year. And of course, he explained that it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice, and there's a lot of skills involved. And by this stage, most parents are smiling. Boys are about 50-50. Some boys are thinking, yeah, okay, I get it. Other boys are thinking, he wants to know a lot about rowing, this guy. And I did keep delving with this boy because I didn't think he had it. And I said, so it takes that long to get ready? He said, yeah. I said, do you do the same things every day? Or do you row for 2 kilometres? I said, no, we do all different sorts of things. We do speed sessions and long sessions and weights and land sessions. I said, oh, so you mix it all up, okay. What days of the week do you train? He said, oh, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Oh, you space it out across 6 months. Okay. And then I said, do you actually have any races, or do you just turn up on the day and surprise? And he said, no, you've got to race because that's actually what you're doing on the day. You've got to get used to that. And my final one was, in that first race, if you come last, and this is to Dr. Matthews with the metacognition, I said, when you come last, what does that actually tell you? He said, well, that would say we need to change what we're doing, or we need to work harder, etc. And I said, it's probably better to find out in those practice sessions rather than on the day. And then the penny started to drop. Oh, you're talking about schoolwork. I said, yeah. Yes, I am. Yeah.
Just one quick one for me that I think I can maybe add to answering that question. I think having a range of people on your team that you start with is really important as well. I think it might have been Ravenswood that we're talking about. They had every sort of faculty area covered or something. I think we were quite similar in the early days. So we did have representatives from each of our faculties as part of our original team. And I think that was really useful because that's where the champions were originally. So every staff room could have a conversation around this stuff because there was someone there to initiate it. If people wanted to have a look at exemplars, it was usually that person. So I think just to spread the word around the school, it's really useful to think about the people that are in your team and sort of the reach they have across the school.
Thank you. Thanks.
Can we please put our hands together for the panel? Thank you very much. You want to do that? Okay. We have a little, at the end. Okay, I'll do this a little bit now. Okay, go stick to the script, otherwise I'll be in trouble. Thank you very much to our panelists and all of our partner schools for their excellent presentations and rich discussion in this session. We hope that you have enjoyed hearing from our schools and that their work has inspired some ideas for your own context. It is now lunchtime. Lunch will be served out in the atrium where we had morning tea, but we also invite you to make your way into the room opposite to view our PhD and research posters. We have an hour for lunch, so use this time to network, meet someone new, ask some questions about the projects that you've heard about, and then we'll see you back here at 2 p.m. to share stories with you about the exciting and diverse industry partnerships. Thank you. Panelists, do you want to come out? We have a little something for you.